Hey pizza delivery people, what is your worst delivery story? 1. Got offered a BJ by a dude. 2. Chubby woman offered to show me her tea for cash back. 3. Arrived at a home to deliver a pizza and nobody is opening the door. I wait for about 2 minutes and I'm getting ready to leave. 2 cop cars pull up to the door and both policemen proceed to put on gloves and one goes to his trunk and pulls out a shotgun. One of them walks up to me and says there won't be any deliveries today. That cop definitely had that line prepped for years before he finally got to use it. I was working for Pizza Hut and I got to a house right as a Domino's delivery driver got there. We waited together at the door for a while as the customer got her money. She ordered pizza from 2 places at the same time. It was very awkward. Fight to the death. I posted earlier but this is a good weird different story too. I had a delivery where this dude had 2 dogs. It was hot out and I had both my windows open. Well, I went to go back to my car and both of his dogs had jumped into my car and one was in the backseat and the other was in the front. Both ready to go. I opened my door and they would not leave. I had to drag 2 fully grown big dogs out of my car. He told me that they wanted to go to the lake. To top it off, he tipped me pretty crappy and didn't even help me get the dogs out and the dogs scratched my car. God, I'm so glad I don't do that job anymore. This sounds like a good place to share this experience. So I live in a small town. Pretty innocent here. I was on a regular delivery to what was a fairly normal part of the housing in town. As I was arriving I noticed a man on the sidewalk hunched over and I thought to myself, man, he's drunk already and it's just past 4. Just a few houses down from there I parked and made my way to the address. As I was walking up a few cop cars flew by me towards that man, and I proceeded to knock while still looking at the cars. When I turned my head, oh so slowly, there was a smear of blood. I scanned the door and farther down there was blood everywhere, pulling down the steps and making a trail to that hunched over man. Immediately after a woman in and sub speeds by yelling, "Get the frick out of there," so I dropped the bag and just booked it down the street. Later on after talking to those officers, more arriving too, turns out the dude had knocked on the door not even moments before I arrived and the man who answered just stabbed him and ran. That ruined my day for sure. TLDR. Arrived to a stabbing scene moments after it happened, almost becoming the victim. I'm no pizza delivery driver, but I used to deliver Chinese food for a takeaway in a pretty rough neighborhood. One delivery was to a block of flats. As I pulled up, I spotted a guy sat on the steps leading to the entrance. He was pawing feverishly at his crotch. Weird, I thought, as I got out and grabbed the food box. As I got closer, I saw that he had pulled his pants down round his thighs. Great, I think. Another drunk weirdo. Then, as I'm slowly walking closer, he pulls out a spoon and a lighter, dumps something into the spoon and holds the flame under the spoon. I'm trying not to stare as he pulls out a syringe and loads it. I'm stood at the door waiting to be buzzed in, and see this guy out of the corner of my eye lift up his dong and stick the needle into his balls, completely oblivious to my presence. I'm buzzed in, deliver the food, and on my way out I see the guy stood in the street shouting at a bush. What the frick? TLDR smack. Not even once. I used to work for Pizza Hut when I was in high school, and one day one of the delivery drivers didn't return from a delivery. After 30 minutes the manager tried calling him, with no response. He tried again about 15 minutes later and a police officer answered the phone to explain what had just happened. Apparently the driver showed up to deliver the pizza, and the guy that answered the door was drunk and violent and ended up throwing the pizza in the driver's face. I think he said the order was wrong or something. The driver had piping hot pizza sauce thrown in his eyes and then he fell down the stairs, breaking his arm. Gotta be that guy's worst delivery ever. Had the job for a week, but still got a gun pulled on me. Sort of. Went out to a house and this guy opens the door and invites me in. He goes to get the money and I am standing around waiting when he comes back with a pistol and points it at me. I have no clue what to do and I can't remember what I said if anything, but his face became very worried. Apparently he just got the gun and was very proud of it. He just wanted to show it to me. He put it away, paid me and gave me a poor tip. I got back in my car and was shaking. My parents didn't believe that story either when I told it to them later that night. SAP accidentally robs pizza delivery guy when he just wanted to show off his new gun. I used to work at the CSE, Customer Service Center, for Pizza Hut in the Kansas City metropolitan area. I would take orders for the whole city when someone would call 648-8888. Everything in the computer system was pulled up by telephone number. I received a sad call one day. The person had called in to make an order. There were notes everywhere. Only management high-ups could put in notes like this about that whatever their order was, it was 100% free, and to notify the on-staff manager that you had placed the order. Further into the notes I read it was because it was the family of a delivery driver that had been murdered while delivering pizzas. I do have respect for the company, though, for making a gesture to the family like that. I have a couple, but I'll tell you of the time I set the firehouse on fire. The pizza shop I delivered for sold a 36-inch party pizza. The thing was massive, incredibly hard to get out of the oven, and the toppings would slide everywhere upon delivery. In Idaho, one afternoon we get an order in from the local fire station for one of our party pizzas. Awesome. Sounds like a good tipping delivery. I carry the giant pizza in through the firehouse into their lunchroom kitchen. I look around to set the pizza down, but alas, there is no room. Empty pizza boxes are everywhere. One fireman who saw my predicament bustled over to clear room for the new pizza, setting the empty boxes in a pile on the stove. I begin to count out change for a $50 when a burning smell begins to fill the room. Then the smoke came, then the flames. Apparently someone had just used the stove and the burners were still hot enough to light 20+ greasy pizza boxes on fire. We probably watched the fire for upwards of 30 seconds before someone piped up, guys, do we have an extinguisher in the kitchen?" They ran out to find one. The whole building was ringing. People were running to the truck to get ready to go out on a call. It was pandemonium for about 2 minutes. The fire gets put out. They tell me to keep the change from the $50 and they asked me not to write about this for our local newspaper. I delivered pizzas for way too long, but the money is good and it's a pretty chill job, so why not? This was my worst experience because it was the scariest. I get to a house, man answers door. Regular looking kinda guy, white middle-aged, comb over. He asks me to come inside and put everything big, order lots of sides and drinks on the kitchen table. Sure, why think twice about it? I go inside and just as I get about 3 steps past him and the door, I hear it slam behind me and he says in a ice in your spine kind of voice, "You aren't going anywhere." I freeze and feel like I am gonna throw up my adrenal gland. He is talking to his cat. He is totally nice and tips me like $8 and says stay safe out there as I'm leaving. I got a block away and burst into tears. The next morning was the most beautiful of my whole life so far. LOL, sounds like something that I'd do, though I'd apologize profusely when I realized that my warning to the cat had scared you. I work in a big college town, and during last Oktoberfest some drunk college frat boys flipped my car while I was at someone's door. A few incidents spring to mind. The bastards that place their sprinklers in such a way that you can't get to the front door without getting wet, then leave them on when they order. Crappy people who dump an armful of coins on you, unsorted, and then get offended when you count it before leaving. The unwashed shanky woman who used her bra as a purse. Hang on, love, I've got the coins in here somewhere. Then warm coins hit your hand, shudder, and finally, naked people. Honestly, it takes 20 minutes for a delivery. It's a small town. Surely you can't wait that long to sex fap. But then you also get attached to the nice regulars. I was sad when 1x family size deal delivered to a house later became 2 separate orders, 1x large deal to the house and 1x small deal to the local motel. That last part took me a moment to figure out. That is sad. I was a pizza delivery driver for all of 3 days. The guy that hired me apparently had no authority to hire people. He just wanted to get some help for the shop while the manager was out of town. When the manager returned, he basically asked me who I was, what I was doing there, then fired me. Anyways, my first delivery was to a high school football game. 100 pizzas. I drove an Acura Integra at the time and it was filled to the gills with pizza as I made my way up there. Dropped off the pizzas, accepted payment, wished a good day, 0 tip. 100 pizzas and not even a nickel for a tip. This isn't necessarily the worst, but it is the most interesting. It was almost like a scene from an 80s college movie. The food part was normal, just a couple of larges. I roll up to the house to which a party is happening inside, and there is a guy passed out and duct taped from ankle to chest to a lawn chair in the front yard. I ring the doorbell and this 19-year-old answers. He completely forgot they ordered pizza and tells me to get the money from the guy in the lawn chair. So I go up to the guy and I can't wake him up, so I go back to the guy in the house, who then, with a frustrated attitude, grabs a flute and blasts it in the lawn chair guy's ear. After some mumbling, the flute guy goes back inside and the lawn chair guy grabs money from his pocket with his one free hand and hands me a wad of bills covered in what I really hope is wet silly putty and says keep the change. I didn't count it then because I wanted to GTFO. When I counted it back at the restaurant, I ended up getting a $43 tip on a $31 bill. Worth it. TL. DR. Guy duct tap to a lawn chair gets woken up by a flute and hands me wet and slimy money. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that guy was a Snorlax. Not a pizza delivery driver, but I did make deliveries for a toasted sub shop called Chiba Hut. Their whole deal is that everything about the place is based off of marijuana. Sub sizes were nug, pinner, and blunt. All the sandwiches were named after strands of weed. You get the idea. Since I worked there, everyone assumed that I was a gigantic pothead too. I'm actually just a guy that doesn't smoke and needed a part-time job to pay for school. I saw everything you can think of while making deliveries. People that didn't have any money for food but wanted to pay with weed. People that had money for food but wanted to tip me with weed. I do freelancing tattoos and I can't accept cash payments legally where I'm from since I don't have a license, but I can accept payments via gifts. I've gotten quite an array of items, like a couple Nintendo DS's, a PSP, pot, a case of beer. That tattoo was more of an edit to a previous tattoo, and of course, when I'm not seeing any women, I accept the occasional sexual favor. Driving to delivery address, clipped the curb on a S-bend, flipped the car, the giant phone on the roof stopped it from rolling. Fireman ate all the pizza, edit. I'm from Aussie. It's spelled curb here, especially in engineering circles. Look it up. Not me, but a buddy went on this delivery. After ringing the doorbell a few times, they finally answered and invited him in. They led him into the living room where a movie was playing on the wall by way of projection. They went into the next room to grab the cash. As they did, my friend looked over towards the movie playing and realized it was P. After further investigation, he realized the two people in the movie freaking were his customers. They came back and tried to rope him into a threesome. Not me, but a buddy went on this delivery. After ringing the doorbell a few times, they finally answered and invited him in. I've seen enough bad pornos to guess what happens next. More sad than anything, I delivered to a house on a Thursday night, and the girl who answered was probably about 19 or 20. She was also completely drug fucked. She looked like she hadn't showered for about a year. Smelled like it too. Her eyes were really sunken and baggy, like she hadn't slept in a week. Her skin looked greasy from sweat, and she had track marks on her arm. She was just a whole big ball of unattractiveness because she was so stoned. The next night, I got another delivery to the same house. The same girl answered, but this time she wasn't stoned. She'd had a shower, I'm guessing a decent night's sleep, and she'd put on a little bit of makeup, just the typical everyday amount for girls. She was freaking gorgeous, one of the best looking women I've ever seen. Try and imagine the difference between Keith Richard now and Keith Richard when he was young. Like that. But a female, and the difference was one day. It was very depressing to see how being hooked on drugs can do that to someone, especially that young. You do see some depressing crap on deliveries sometimes. I remember we had this one regular lady who looked like she had been beat on pretty badly pretty regularly. The bruises would disappear for a little while and then be right back a week later. I always tried to be extra friendly towards her for that. She was real nice too. Had a cute dog. This was just over 15 years ago. Had just left the pizza shop with 3 deliveries. Turned onto the highway. Probably not even 5 minutes later, some crazy freaking boxer shorts runs in front of the car. I am doing at least 80 kilometers per hour. Bang, cleaned him up. He hit the window right in front of me, which cracked everywhere, and pushed in about an inch towards me and rolled over the top of the car. I don't even remember pulling over, just in too much shock. Not long after, the police turn up and start doing what they have to do, which of course means they rang my boss. I didn't have a mobile phone at this stage. My boss turned up, scowled at me, and grabbed the pizzas out the back of the car to deliver them. This is at least 40 minutes after I left the shop by now. I went home a few hours later when the police were finished and pretty much collapsed as soon as I got in the door. Luckily my girlfriend was home early from work and helped me to bed. Anyway, the poor bugger I hit copped a lot of broken bones and was in hospital for a long time. He had just fought with his partner and tried to kill himself by running into traffic. It took me a few days to get the skin cleaned off the roof and bonnet. It was stuck on like paint. It also took 2 weeks to get the car fully panel beaten and the front bumper, light and windscreen replaced. I was found to not be at fault while I was still at the scene of the accident, not that I felt any better about it. The next morning I quit. I was still shaken up and my boss rang me telling me I should have to pay for the late pizzas as he had to credit the customers. Freaking prick. I never claimed any money off the poor guy I run over. It cost me a lot to fix the car and it never felt the same again driving it. My first car, but it didn't feel right to sue him over it. He was in hospital for over 4 months. To me he had been through enough. TLDR. No, I didn't reimburse my butthole boss for the pizzas. Whoa, your ex-boss was a stone cold douchebag. There was one time that I delivered to this older man in an apartment complex. He invited me in and told me that his money was on his kitchen counter. He was seated on a recliner and let me know that it was hard for him to move much. I told him that was okay and set the pizza down on his coffee table. I then took the money from the counter and noticed there was $20 more than necessary. I tried to hand him the extra and he told me to keep it, then asked if I could stay for a minute. Awkwardly, I asked him what he needed and he said, just to talk. He then proceeded to tell me about how he hadn't talked to his only son in 10 years. I listened and tried to tell him maybe he should just call his son up, see how he was, and he very rudely asked me what the heck do I know about anything. I moved to leave and he suddenly blurted, "And I have Lyme disease," and then laughed as though he were kidding and were just making a joke about how his life sucked, and on top of it all, he had a debilitating disease. I wasn't sure what to do, so I awkwardly chuckled. He yelled at me, told me it was a serious disease and told me to get out of his house. I quickly obliged him, tucking my well-earned 20 into my pocket. The next week, he called again. I let the new guy take it. TLDR. A man gives me $20 and tells me he has Lyme disease and to get the frick out of his house. This did not happen to me, but when I started working at Pizza Hut, one of my co-workers who was a dishwasher gave me an interesting suggestion. Go to Walmart and buy one of those 12-gauge flare guns. You know, the kind they put in boats for emergencies. Keep that bad boy under the driver's seat. I asked him why and he proceeded to explain that 6 years prior, he was working for Pizza Hut in Chicago as a delivery driver. Right before closing time, they got an order for delivery in a neighborhood that they usually refuse to deliver to after dark, due to prior muggings. However, he said that he was broke and needed the cash, so he agreed to deliver for a $10 tip. On the way there, he stopped at a stoplight and someone broke his driver's side window with a brick. The man demanded his cash envelope and my co-worker explained that he had to reach down and get it. He instead retrieved the flare gun that he had bought after he had been mugged 2 months prior. As he brandished it, the guy took a few steps away from the vehicle and my co-worker fired the flare gun into his chest. The would-be burglar was wearing a nylon windbreaker and it lit it on fire immediately. The police arrived soon after and took the burned man to the hospital and eventually jail. The strangest part was, he said that a few years later, he was driving through that neighborhood and saw the same guy with his shirt off, and he had a large, nasty scar where he had been shot with the flare. TLDR. Don't frick with Pizza Hut delivery drivers. Thug life. When I was about 20, I used to live in a bad part of town in an apartment. Neighbor was a pimp, using underage girls. Other neighbor was a welfare fraud, only keeping the place for the checks, living with his girlfriend in another house. It was the kind of place where you looked through the peephole before answering the door and always looked over your shoulder before entering the house. One night, the doorbell rings and I answer the intercom to a Chinese man. saying he was delivering an order. I didn't order anything, but let him come up to see if there was a mistake. We had all kinds of calls, especially girls from my pimp neighbor who would just press all buttons until someone opened the door. The guy had his hands full, several plastic bags in each hand, and I explained that we had not ordered anything. He must have had the wrong building. No biggie. He went back downstairs and out the building. I closed the door and almost instantly heard screaming. We looked out the window and saw some men beating someone up that seemed to be the Chinese guy. I told my GF to call the police and ran downstairs with the first thing I could find. I think it was a walking cane. As I ran out the door, some 16-17-year-old thugs saw me bursting out the door and decided to make a run for it. Unfortunately, the delivery guy ran away also, so I went after the delivery guy, who roughly ran in the same direction as the thugs, still holding onto his Chinese food like a boss. Suddenly, I realized the street lights were out and I was running after some criminals with nothing more than a stick, so I returned. Meanwhile, the police had shown up and within half an hour they located the thugs and the Chinese guy in 2 different locations. Even though I was a witness, had called the police and was walking around barefoot with nothing more than a cane and some pants, the police wouldn't take my statement. Thugs got 3 months detention and decided to hang out more in my building, but the Chinese guy was forever grateful, even came by my house later to thank me. TLDR. Saved the Chinese man barefoot, bare-chested, but with a walking cane. I scared the heck out of a pizza delivery guy about 12 years ago. My wife and I were going to a costume party that night, so I was dressed up like an inbred in these weird shorts, a sideways baseball cap, and those Billy Bob teeth that make you look a little like a Neanderthal. It was supposed to be a funny costume, but if you didn't know it was a joke, I guess it could be a little frightening too because I'm also kind of a big guy. So the doorbell rings with our pizza and I open door. I say nothing and the guy stares at me holding the pizza and not knowing what to think. I then start jumping up and down, yelling "Pizza's here! Pizza's here" really loudly and then go into this happy dance all over our living room. My wife then comes out from the back and politely pays and thanks him for the pizza while the whole time while I'm jumping up and down screaming "Pizza's here." The guy was totally shocked, but we gave him a nice tip. I used to store manage a pizza shop in a rough part of the city. I had this driver on his first ever shift. He was on a delivery to house on a really rough street, and when he knocked on the door, the guy that answered the door knocked out the driver and took the pizza. Just the pizza, not the float. When he came to, drove back to the shop and parked up. He knocked the side mirror off a crackhead's car, got another beating, dropped off his float, car sign and quit that night. I delivered groceries for a small store in a rural area. A lot of crazy cat ladies. The smell was unbearable. By far the worst were the cheap nursing homes. So depressing. I've heard stories from visitors to nursing homes and they're depressing. Like old people wanting to escape and how they just want to die. LOL. Thanks for this post. I haven't thought of this night in 15 years. I worked for a small-time mom-pop pizzeria. On weekends their 26-year-old son would run the shop. He spent a lot of Saturdays working while quite drunk and would mess with customers on the phone. One night he sent me on a run to a woman he had been chatting up after taking her order. He told me to take my time. The woman was obviously drunk and wanted more than just a pizza. I stopped on the way to get the condoms and then hurried over to her house. I swear, I was smiling all the way to the front door, looking forward to getting a piece of strange tale. It never occurred to me to wonder why a single woman would order an extra large deep dish with a 2 liter and breadsticks. I quit smiling a nanosecond after the door opened. 400+ pounds of frisky, drunken, white trash woman was standing at the door and I dang near crap myself. My boss was laughing his butt off when I got back about 4 minutes later. She had called and complained about the service. LOL. You totally shoulder went for it. I live in a very Dutch town and I've delivered pizzas for over 2 years now, and one thing you learn very fast is that Dutch people don't tip. If I get a $2 tip on a $30 order, that's really good. Another rule of thumb is that the richer you are, the less money you have to give as a tip. One specific instance was one night I had quite a few deliveries and was running behind a little bit as I was the only driver left for the night. I took one delivery to not only the richest neighborhood in town, but to the richest family in town. A huge mansion that doubles its size every year or two when the owner feels like adding on a few rooms, and probably $500,000 sitting in his driveway. Anyways, I'm on my way to this guy's house and I had delivered to him before and he has never given me, or any of my co-workers, a cent as a tip even though the order is always on time, always correct, and always hot. As expected, he writes a check out for exact change and I head back to the store. I grab my next delivery, which is to a hotel. I love delivering to hotels because it's usually people from out of town, aka not Dutch, so we usually get better tips then. Well, I get to the guy's room and realize his order is wrong after he opens the door. I apologize and fix it for him, meaning he has to wait another 10-15 minutes for his food, but he didn't seem to mind too much. After I bring him the correct order, I start talking to the guy for a bit cause he was pretty cool and seemed like a very happy person. I found out however that he had just been fired from his job, lost his house, and was now living in the hotel day by day until he could find somewhere else to stay. Even with everything collapsing in front of him, this guy was still one of the friendliest guys I've ever met. Chatted me up for a while, offered me a beer I declined because I was driving. And to top it all off, he offered me a $10 tip. And even though getting that big of a tip would have made my night, I just couldn't take it telling him not to worry about giving me my tip. Now that I'm remembering this night, the next delivery I took was to an old lady living in a trailer park whose trailer looked like it had taken quite a beating, and she even offered me a big tip, which I also couldn't take. Even though, like many of you, I dream of being really rich, but at the same time people like this make me dream that I never actually become rich. Just have enough to support myself and what I need. I've seen firsthand time and time again how easily money can corrupt the people that seek to have it all. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.